Welcome to the Burning Chair podcast with Simon Finney and Peter Oxley.
Hello and welcome to the second Burning Chair podcast. Here's Pete. Pete, welcome.
Hello. Thank you.
And I am Simon. And this week's podcast and webcast is an interview with Simon Bewick, who is an author we've been working with recently on the Burning anthology. Is that right, Pete?
That is right. All available in all good bookstores.
Indeed. And Simon churned out a cracking short story for us in what it turned out to be was in a week. Did he say a week?
He did, yeah. It was quite interesting, actually, just hearing about how he kind of like that process and coming from nothing to an idea and working to a deadline, which is a great lesson for all of us, I guess.
Absolutely. And really interesting guy, great guy. And we recorded this just under a week ago. And so here it is then. Cool. So Simon, welcome. And welcome to the Burning Chair kind of webcast. And thanks for doing this. What we were hoping was we could just ask you a few questions about you and about your writing and about how you go about these kind of things. So brilliant. So thanks very much.
No problem.
Superb. So look, to start off with, it'd be good just to know a little bit about you as a writer.
Okay. So I've worked in the publishing industry for 25 years. And during a lot of that time, I was traveling globally, spending a lot of times in hotels and airports and so on. And I really just used that as an opportunity to write on and off. And this is going back, as I say, 20 years, really. The invention of the laptop was a great thing to inherit that. At that point, I started submitting a few short stories. I think particularly as more magazines started to go online, I found that easier to start submitting, particularly to US publications. You didn't have that interminable wait of sending off a paper manuscript, waiting 3 weeks to get your rejection slip or whatever it was. I let the writing slide a little bit. I had an agent at one point.
Okay.
I'd written a novel, got quite a lot of interest from that, but for whatever reason it didn't come to be with that particular agent. And then I really just got caught up with other things for quite a while, having a young family back then, lots of work and so on. So earlier this year, last year I guess, I started writing again more seriously, producing more stuff, and then took the chance when I had it to I say take early retirement. My wife says that's not the case at all. I actually offer consultancy services for small to medium-sized enterprises. But what that has allowed me to do is have more time at home to write and less time traveling and commuting and so on. That's freed up a few hours each day to give me more time to spend on writing.
Mm. And do you think your time in the publishing industry, how do you think that's influenced you and how you write and how you... hang on, Pete, I can see you trying to pour a bit...
I was trying to be subtle there, sorry.
If you haven't got enough for everyone, Pete...
Sorry, Simon, you've been really good there with a cup of tea there.
The question is unparalleled at Burning Chair, but we do like our drink. So how do you think that affected your writing and how you go about kind of submitting and things like that? The fact that your time in the publishing industry.
Well, I worked in a very different sort of publishing. I mean, I worked for Oxford University Press, particularly within the English language teaching division. So it was a very. They were never going to publish one of my books. Let's put it that. But what it did do, I mean, I was head of digital marketing for Oxford University Press ELT worldwide. So I think what it did do is give me a good understanding as I built the digital strategy for the division. So it really got me thinking more about promoting myself. And really, when I released my first collection of short stories, I saw more as an exercise to learn all of those aspects that I've worked with people in publishing over the years, the editing, the designing, the proof editing, the development editing, the copy editing, the distribution, the social media that my team were responsible for. And I thought, well, I'll just try and do everything myself. Which is an absolutely stupid idea, really, in retrospect, but you live and learn. So I did everything with the first book myself, for better or worse. So I think obviously working in the industry, it gives you a good understanding of how wider types of publishing works. I spent a lot of time visiting bookshops, subbing in materials back in the day when I was a sales consultant. And that certainly helped me when I was visiting independent bookshops with my own materials, to present it almost as I used to do when I was a sales rep, and the same rules apply, really, I think.
Yes.
Tell them why it would appeal to their audiences that are coming through their doors, what you're going to do to support it in terms of marketing, agree on prices, terms, conditions, and so on.
Yeah.
That sort of thing certainly helps. But the actual opportunities working in publishing, I'm always suspicious when you see famous people and they have a son or a daughter that had their own talent, and they'll always come out and say, if anything, it was harder because my father was in the industry. That wasn't.
Now, I don't want to name any names, but I know exactly some of the candidates you're talking about there. So I didn't get any of the nepotism or benefits from that, really. But what I did get, I think, is a good broad understanding of how booksellers and audiences, regardless of the book that they're looking at, whether it's a school textbook or a dictionary or a grammar or a fiction book, what they're looking for and how they go about finding it. Simon, we want to ask you more about the publishing industry, but before we do that, can we ask you a bit about your kind of writing style and the genre you've chosen? You've got you're very much the ones I've read, and Pete, I think you'll jump in here as well. Very kind of dark, mysterious, a little bit kind of there's something there's a crime angle, but it's it's got a slightly dark crime kind of aspect to it.
Noir sort of thing, yeah.
Noir's the word I'm looking for. Thanks, Pete.
Yeah.
What are your influences? What's led you to go for that as a particular genre?
Well, I think growing up, I was always a horror reader. I mean, the first things I remember reading is in terms of adult books, would have been, well, you had your Ray Bradbury, but probably the first things I read were much less subtle than Ray Bradbury, and it would have been your James Herbert, where you could guarantee that you had your violence on pages X, Y, and Z, and then you had the sex scene on page 24, and for
God bless James Herbert.
Yes, and for boys at school, that was what we'd read around the camp, the Boy Scout campfire, and because I was never big enough to beat up kids for their pocket money at lunchtime, I used to write these sorts of graphic in the literal sense, novel, short stories that they would take away and pay me, not beat me up for. So I used to write horror, but as I started reading more and more, it became much more crime, particularly the sort of 50s stuff, the Richard Starkey, Elmore Leonard, Lawrence Block is probably my go-to author in terms of who I look to read, both in terms of writing manuals, but also the fiction that he writes. But I think that combination of the two, that writing horror, and I think there's a very fine line between, you're not writing about vampires, werewolves, or whatever. There's a very fine line between what makes a villain in a book a standard mystery crime villain and what turns them into a serial killer stroke horror thing. So I quite often I don't know which way a story is going to go and where it will fall into. So I mean, a bit of blatant self-plugging, but my first collection.
Do it.
Yeah.
That's what.
What's it called, Simon?
I
know what it's called, but I'm going to ask you.
Called Basement Tales.
Basement Tales.
Basement Tales. So I'm actually sitting in the basement cellar of our house now, and that's where I tend to do most of my writing. And that really took, as I say, when I was looking at self-publishing, I took a bunch of stories that I'd already had published, some of them horror, some of them almost bordering on sci-fi or fantasy, some of them more crime, and some I just don't know where they fit, and put them together, and they are very much, as you say, dark, and can go one way or the other, and you're not necessarily sure what it is you're reading when you start to read it. Possibly when you finish reading it, you're still not too sure. Well, that's all.
To what extent do you plan out your novel? I mean, are you at the Stephen King end of just, go with it to see where it goes? Or are you the kind of more structured, I want to lay it out and see where the story arcs are before I even put a, pen to paper?
I think I'm one thing and I end up being another thing, because I'll think I've got a plot and a structure worked out, but it just goes off completely. And I'll think, actually, as I'm writing this, this seems to me to be more interesting than the original idea I had. So some of them, as we all have, I think, as writers, I've got my various notebooks that have been filled up with ideas, and some of those will be one line that I've heard from somewhere that I think there could be a story in that, and other things will come fully formed. And I think actually the story that appears in Burning is quite a good example of that, which we might come on to a little bit later. But it started out as being one thing, and that was just the idea, and it went somewhere where I didn't expect it to go at all, really. So yes, my first collection was very much a real mixture of things representing what I'd had published in various genres across the market. My second collection, which just came out a week and a half ago, is much more traditional, kind of twist in the tail, I would say. That's where I tend to go with a lot of my stories. Even if I don't intend them to have a twist, they end up having one. And these are, there's no supernatural elements of any sort in the second collection. They are bordering, because some of them are very dark, that they are bordering on certainly psychological thriller, which bends into horror at times, I think. But they are what I call crime, and hence why I went for the. My wife actually designed the cover of it, which is a very.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah,
that's brilliant. Yeah, that's pretty good.
And that really was the way it was. Some of them are quite playful because it might be dark. Some of them are dark, but there's always, I think, quite a jet black sense of humour through it.
Yeah. What I liked, and I think Pete, you and I talked about this, what we really liked about the 5 votive candles of Joe Ray, which is your short story submission for the Burning Anthology, okay, was it didn't go for that big, here's the big classic twist at the end of the short story. There was just a nice trickling through of surprising, facts. And I don't want to. Do I want to spoil it? But I probably shouldn't put any spoilers on here. But there's about 3, maybe 4 kind of surprising turns, let's say, not massive shifts, which was really nice. And you also played with the time and the timeline quite nicely as well. Do you want to talk about that? Just how, because there's a certain maturity as a writer you need to get to, isn't there, to be comfortable and confident in doing that?
You do, yeah. I mean, this sounds as if I'm coming from a very strange place, but I had my little nephews down last week, and one's 8 and one's 10, and I promised I'd write them both a Halloween story, which I did last weekend. And as I was writing it, I thought, are they going to stick with this? Because I don't kind of start a story with a real bang. It is a slow build. And, I'm not a natural children's writer. I think Stephen Wright said, wrote a children's book, not on purpose. Well, I'm kind of the other way, where I was trying to write a children's book, and in the end I was saying to my wife, is this too dark? Is this too long to get to the point? Because they said it's scary, and I think that was the case with the 5 candles story, which originally was going to be 4 candles, but I just couldn't get away from 2 Ronnies.
That's just about to say. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Very good.
I like those sort of stories that don't necessarily have the last line that's, and he was dead all along. that's the big stuff.
Yeah.
Further the little bits throughout, and I think there's certain writers, very successful. Well, I mean, say the name. You know, someone like Jeffrey Deaver now, I think, has got such a reputation for having these twists. They just have one twist after another, and at the end you just get.
Absolutely.
Well, the problem is you can't believe anything, can you? You end up just not believing anything.
Yeah. And I very much like the idea of the unreliable narrator to a degree, but I think it's got to be quite carefully done. And I think I've read so many stories where, you know, someone picks up a hitchhiker when there's a murderer on the loose, and hey, guess what? The murderer is actually the person that's picking up the hitchhiker. And that's the sort of thing that you think, well, we've all seen that a lot, and sometimes I'm not saying my stories are subtle necessarily, but I think they do build up, and sometimes that they are too subtle. I mean, I think you guys were completely right in terms of the first draft that I handed in, and I was very pleased with the ending. And then you came back and said, "Fine, I think this is what," and I went.
Yeah, we don't do subtle here.
And it was absolutely right. But yes, I mean, the story was written very, very quickly because I wanted to take part in the anthology. It really interested me. So when I originally wrote to you and asked for more information, and you came back and said, well, it's just got to be something around the theme of burning within it. And I kind of looked through the stuff that I had written and all of the old stories that I have, and I thought, well, I don't have anything intrinsically about that. So unless you kind of crowbarred it in and said, and then he smoked a cigarette. I thought, well,
we had some of those. Yeah.
We did. Yep.
So, and I think I got that information from you about 2 or 3 weeks before the deadline. I just thought, oh well, that's a shame. I haven't come up with anything. And then I took my son to New York for his 21st birthday, and I went off sightseeing, and I went to a church, which was just this phenomenal building, St. Barnaby's, and St. Bart's, and St. Bart's, and I'm not a religious person particularly, but I just went in and saw the votive candles, and this idea just kind of came to me,
Right.
and came back and thought, well, I've got a week to write. You know, I think 6,000 words was what you said the minimum, around that. And I thought, well, can I get 6,000 words written in a week to my satisfaction? So after the fourth night, after a few late nights, I got 24,000 words. So, I either go one way with it, and it was a very interesting editing exercise, and to bring that down. And I took 2 subplots within it. I mean, it really was a novella rather than a short story at that point. And there's 2 quite chunky subplots within that I think, as you said, Simon, to have those twists throughout, the step changes almost.
Yeah,
that was quite tricky to get back after taking such big chunks out, as to whether they would still work organically, I think. As I say, in all seriousness, that story was very, very quickly written, but the work that you did on it, and the edit job that you did do, and the amount of effort you put in it really was a pleasure working with you. So I do want to thank you, because I think the effort you guys have put into it has been absolutely astonishing. So thanks a lot for your time and patience with us authors.
It's our pleasure. Yeah. I think we really enjoyed. We did it. We had moments of dummy spitting and tears and sweat and stuff like that.
Oh, that was just
yeah, exactly. But we genuinely did enjoy it, and I mean, your story was fantastic, and I'd still, it's one of the 14 that I really enjoy reading. Including Simon.
No favourites. No favourites. So Simon, let's ask you back to the kind of industry overall. self-publishing versus traditional publishing? I mean, we have a strong view on this, obviously, but what's your view on how the whole kind of sector is kind of changing?
Well, interestingly, I run a 2-hour workshop. Well, I've done a couple of workshops for local writers groups, which basically breaks down to talk about the different types of publishing. So looks at and dismisses quite quickly vanity publishing, but to explain the kind of history of where vanity publishing has come from and what the difference is really between working with small presses or independents, and really what to look for in a reputable one rather than something that is potentially verging, blending into those horrible old want to be a writer adverts that we've all seen. So really the workshop looks at the difference between that, small publishing, indie publishing, and then the big five. And I look at some timelines as to what it means for an author, using industry stats and so on, as to what the different steps are and which ones you can almost jump over or avoid if you're self-publishing, or cut down quite drastically if you're working with an independent or a small press publisher who maybe don't have the overheads or the woolliness that one of the mainstream publishers have. Certainly in terms of opportunity, I think one of the quotes I say in the workshop that I run is, it's the best of times and worst of times. One of the places I first did this workshop was at a local venue here. I'm living in Leamington Spa at the moment, and it was a local venue, and they put it up as advertised as how to get published.
Brilliant.
Well, I wouldn't have been quite old in that thing, but actually I used that as a starting point in the workshop and said, I can guarantee, really that showman hustler style, saying, I guarantee anybody here can go out and be published by the end of the night. Everybody sits there and says, if you want to write restaurant reviews, TripAdvisor. If you want to write book reviews, Amazon. If you want to write cinema reviews, IMDb. So really, anybody can do that. The question is what you want to be getting your work in recognition for. And I think self-publishing is the next step on for that. That people can do. It's a question of what you put out there to be seen. So I think it's a good thing. I think it's open to abuse, and I think we've seen, I'll not mention names now, but we've seen certain mainstream publishers that have tried to adopt a self-publishing model within their own business and come in for quite a backlash when their royalties or their processes or charges and so on are not what you would expect. But yes, best of times, worst of times. I mean, on one hand, there's so many places now, I mentioned at the beginning, being able to send things off by email to the internet rather than get your 20 copies Xeroxed off just to show how old I am and send them off to the reply. But it also, unfortunately, means that a lot of really good magazines, paying magazines, have unfortunately gone to ground. And when you look at the likes of Playboy, who are struggling to find a business model now that works, and whether you read it for the article or not, and you look at the history that we have, Playboy, one of those iconic in history who published first works by the likes of Ray Bradbury, Stephen King, Joyce Carol Oates, Gabrielle Marquez, these sort of people, and they're struggling to. All right, they're an exception, but unfortunately, I'm sure like you, I've had a number of works accepted for publication at a reasonable rate, only for the magazine to go out of business. And some have been around for years and years, and they get no information about it. I'm very sorry, but as of next month, we're folding. So yeah, pros and cons, but really that's something I spend about an hour talking about, and also within the workshop I talk about working with different elements. So what it's like to work with an agent, what you should look for in a designer, with an editor, the different types of editing, and how much it's going to cost you. Because I think a lot of writers think that self-publishing means free publishing, and potentially it does. if you want to do it very badly, and you can get anything out there. But if you want to make it look at least reasonably professional, then you do have to either spend a lot of time on it yourself, or you do anyway, or you have to start thinking about getting people that are really, really good at this sort of thing. And again, as you guys will know equally well, if not better than me, you think something's absolutely perfect and it's ready to go, and then suddenly, how did I miss that and that and that?
You're absolutely right. You know, these things look easy from outside, and actually they're huge time sinks. You know, they just require a lot of investment time-wise. But Pete and I have spent time recently with at various events that include traditional publishing companies and representatives of that, and I think we've been quite shocked at how, and I don't want to be disrespectful because they've absolutely got their place and they produce some fantastic books, but you know how slow to switch to the new digital way of working, you know, and how they could quite quickly, you know, maintain their current model, but also have this as well and integrate it. I mean, Pete, do you want to, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we there was one in particular which did surprise me and shocked me in equal measure, which was, I mean, I've self-published since 2012, so what's that, about 6-7 years, and I've been various masterminds and stuff like that, so I've seen various bits. And talking to this one person who said, yeah, I do, we publish, but also we do self-publishing services. So I said, okay, what's this? And it turned out it was just exactly what you were saying about it was almost like a bolt-on. We do, you know, we will help you self-publish, but not really. And she had no clue about what actually self-publishing was. And we had a debate about what was the most important thing that any author needs to think about. And she said, well, yes, it's the typeface. And I just looked at her and was like, I don't think that's right. What about the cover? What about the marketing? What about this? No, typeface. I just thought, oh my God.
Yes.
Scary.
It is quite scary. Some of the attitudes out there as well, and also there is a bit of a narrative that some of the traditional publishers have been supporting, which is, you know, self-published books are of a lower quality, which we know is absolutely not the case. You know, so I mean, you must have seen a lot of this as well.
Absolutely, and you know, in the workshops that I do, as well as all of that bit, and it's in no way a gripe about any one type of publishing other than vanity publishing, I guess. But it's not saying one's better than the other. It's more saying what's right for you, and to be realistic. And I think publishers are starting to see the value of it because it can save them a lot of time. I mean, look at something like 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
It hasn't done badly as a book as it started out. So for publishers, potentially the saving in having to wade through those slush piles and having to do all of that sort of stuff, they're almost potentially 80% finished product if something has done well through a self-published route that can potentially then move on to the next level as they see it in terms of above the line promotion that frankly self-published authors just couldn't afford to do. And at the same time, I think they are not at the moment prepared to go into the waters of things like Kindle Unlimited. So, you know, you look at the amount of ebooks that are selling, and it's self-published on publishing prices that are absolutely ruling that area because of things like Kindle Select and Kindle Unlimited. The big five are just saying now that's not an area we want to look at. Now I think they will very soon once they can find a model that suits them. But at the moment, that's a good opportunity for authors.
Yeah, absolutely right. One last serious question, I think. Right, okay, which is what advice would you give to writers who are starting out today? You know, who are we're working with a couple of writers who are just coming out of a creative writing course, fantastic material, and we're trying to help and nurture them and you know, show them all the different possibilities, including coming with us, but not just limited to that, self-publishing as well. What advice would you offer to writers who are wanting to make a go of it today?
Ooh, I think my advice would be very basic and very obvious that in that, read more. Uh, because time and again, I hear people saying, "Oh, I haven't got time to read anything. I'm too busy writing myself." And you say, "Well, great that you've got so much stuff to be writing, but don't think of them as mutually exclusive things." And combined with that, I think if you can find yourself a good workshop, and personally, I prefer to do that online than rather than going to. I go to some storytelling things, and they're great fun, and you hear some good stuff. But I think there's a huge amount of value in finding a good online workshop. And I used to be part of one called Critters, which specialises in science fiction, horror, fantasy, and over the years it's branched off to do separate areas. But the model of that was so nice in that you would sign up, it was free, all free and so on, and you'd say how many manuscripts you wanted to receive a week and what genre you wanted to receive them in. And then every Thursday you would get 5, 10, how many you'd asked for, short stories come through in those genres. You go through them and apply the Critters site, and whether you edited them as a development editor or a line editor or a copy editor, it's completely up to you. You know, it could be as long or as short as you want. But as the author that had submitted that piece, by the end of the following week, you had probably had 15, 20, 30 critiques of your work.
Wow.
The person who's doing the critique the following Thursday, you've got everyone else's critique as well. So you could see if you were on the ball, whether you were saying the same sort of things as other people, whether you were on the right track, as it were. And then the critique you do, you got a credit, and when you get a certain amount of credits, you could put your own story in there. You've got to guess the background there, Pete.
Yeah, Pete, I think you've just had a visitor.
Hello, buddy. Yeah, this is my equivalence of the children running in.
Exactly.
But as a model, that was great, you know, and it gave you the chance not just to read more, but it gave you experience in fine-tuning other people's work. So hence you looked at your own with a bit more detail, and it saved you having to go to your poor friends who are sick to death and say, "Well, you just have a look at this, tell me what you think." You know, you had more neutral people telling you it. And, you know, I made some good friends from that over the years. I really recommend that sort of thing to start getting honest feedback about your work, I think.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay. I've got a couple of fun questions to ask you, but Pete, was there anything serious that you wanted to ask?
I guess the only other kind of semi-serious one was just in relation to on your blog, and I've kind of looked through it and all that kind of stuff, and you've got a huge amount of stuff on there. And I know that as writers generally, ironically, sometimes we find it quite difficult to actually churn out blog material, and Si and I are no exception to that. I mean, how do you find that? How do you keep up the momentum and the subjects and stuff?
That's a really good point. And I think that also goes back to Simon's point there, is advice I would give. I try to write as many different things as I can. And I find the blog, as well as writing reviews on TripAdvisor or whatever, I use the blog almost as a little warm-up routine. So I'll get up early in the morning. I tend to get up at 6, and I'll spend half an hour working on a blog post. And I don't try to plan them out too far ahead. So I'll do it each day, and I'll spend half an hour on that. And after the half hour, that's it, as much as I've got done. It might be a couple of hundred words, it might be more, depending how interested I get into it. But I see it almost as a warm-up before I then start doing my proper writing, if you like. And it'll be about more varied things. It might be a review, it might be putting an excerpt from one of my book in, it might be just bits and bobs. I've started a series on there, 100 resources for writers, which are very disparate, from manuals to working techniques to a good grammar book to drop by. So there's a huge amount there. But I'll really just spend half an hour on it or so each day, as I say, as a warm-up, get something out there, and that's how I treat it.
Oh, superb. And it's, I mean, one of the bits I did enjoy, and it's great from a, just from a, you casually browsing, is when you've got your 10 comedy films and 10 horror films and stuff like that, which I guess is fun to write as well.
It is, and I mean, my degree originally is in film studies, so that's what I started writing, was film scripts way back in the day, and I still love to watch movies and I think there's probably more film stuff on the blog than there is book stuff, really, at times. But yeah, I do like the lists. They're easy to write around. They're nice ones to do quickly if you're only spending half an hour on it. So.
Absolutely, fantastic.
Cool. Excellent. Okay, so here's the fun question. So, can you name an author that you hated at first and then grew to really like?
The very first Harlan Coben book I read, and I can't even remember why I didn't like it at the time. I think it was Tell No One, which turned out to be it was made a great French film. But I remember, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think it was a first-person point of view story, and I just felt the end of that was such a horrible cheat. And I thought that was really, not that it was badly written, but it was just this disappointing. Now, since then, I particularly the Myron Bolitar series that Harlan Coben has written, I think is absolutely great, and I'd read anything today. It also works the other way around, where I started off liking writers and really just lost patience.
Yeah. What was your favourite childhood book, Simon?
My favourite childhood book was probably would have been Danny Champion of the World.
Brilliant
book. Great book. Good choice. Good, very good choice. Okay, right. One word answers.
Okay.
Past or present tense?
Past.
Ian Banks or Ian Rankin?
Ian Rankin.
Paper versus digital?
Ooh. Digital.
Facebook or Twitter?
Facebook.
Neil Gaiman or Alan Moore?
Neil Gaiman.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
I mean, we're all probably there with you, but
I mean, I'd prefer to spend time at a party with him, I think.
That was it. You've been a good sport, Simon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for your time, guys. And this is available now.
Fantastic. So there we go. So that was Simon and Simon interviewing each other, and I thought it was really good. Simon and Simon, the two Simons, the Simon Show. And I thought it was really fascinating, actually. Just kind of, he seems like, genuinely nice guy.
Really nice guy.
Yeah, clearly a very talented author. I mean, the story he did for the anthology, we both just thought was, really, really good, didn't we? I mean, that's not just saying it because it's in our anthology, which is in all good bookstores from now. But also it was just, it's a really, really good, compelling story, I think. And clearly he's got a lot of other stuff going on as well. And
great. And he knows a lot about the industry as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think it was quite fascinating actually hearing that journey about how he went from, doing the marketing side and all those bits and all the lessons he's learned from that. So so that was great. So hearing more from him, I guess.
Excellent. I look forward to the next webcast.
Yes, which will be hitting your ears and your eyes in the next week or so. Well, not yours personally, Simon. I'm talking to
that would be weird.
The other people. I'm breaking the third wall in a Deadpool type way. But,
those people.
Yes, you. My finger didn't appear. You. There we go.
Is it not the fourth wall, Pete? I think
it is the fourth wall. Yeah.
Broken.
Yeah, that's
very true. By your dog behind you.
Is he coming again? Hello, mister. Yes, he's telling me it's time to go, which is probably a good time.
That's a good time. All right.
So
thanks,
until
Pete.
next time, everyone. Thank you, Simon. Cheers.
Bye.
You've been watching the Burning Chair podcast with Simon Finney and Peter Oxley. To find out more, visit us at www.burningchairpublishing.com.